Hi, my name's Susan Meyer, and this is Beach Bench Blanket, my piece. A lot of my work in an overall way is influenced by utopian communities and experimental communities in the mid-1800s in the United States and also in the 1960s. So communes in a way. And one particular commune, Drop City, was based in Trinidad, Colorado, which is southern Colorado. And droppers, as they were called, would go to the junkyard and they'd axe out car hoods from the old cars in the junkyard, and they would bring them back and make geodesic domes with them. They were given a Dymaxion Award by Buckminster Fuller in 1967, but Drop City was abandoned by the 1970s. And now there are no, the structures don't exist, but you can Google pictures of them, which I recommend. They're these gorgeous, multicolored, kind of scruffy geodesic domes out in the middle of the sort of deserty landscape. And the multicolors are from the car hoods. I'm interested in these utopian communities for a number of reasons. One, that people who would create these communities would be trying to live off the land and have a life of the mind and kind of these really noble goals. But then there was also this short-lived nature to them, and that they failed ultimately, often. And I'm interested in those two things: the noble gesture, the noble idea, and then the reality, it hitting up against reality. I'm also interested in that idea of the communal and the individual, and how that is in many ways reflective of the history of our country and tensions that go on in our country. Some of them, certainly occurring right now with individual rights and the collective well-being. So Beach Bench Blanket, the way that comes up is these triangular shapes that create the piece. Those are quite reminiscent of Buckminster Fuller's geodesic spheres and domes, and the way that he designed things. Another influence is Gee's-Bend quilts, and I was looking at a lot of images of Gee's-Bend quilts while making these. Gee's-Bend is an area in Alabama where generations of African-American women have made these extraordinary quilts. And I'm interested in the idea of quilt making being, the quilts are named, the people who made them identify themselves as the makers, but also there's a collective quality to making quilts where people kind of come together in quilting bees to assist in this quilt that artistically belongs to the maker in a way. And I think that's a really beautiful idea. Gee's-Bend quilts have, the ones that I was looking at in particular, quite abstract, with real contrast between darks and some lighter colors. Some of them misshapen from wear, which I also think is a really lovely thing. And some of the shape of this, the kind of striped areas of color and the contrast between color are influenced by those quilts. These patches as well, there are kind of some areas with visual imagery and kind of, they seem like patches. That comes into the quilt making as well. So it's called Beach Bench Blanket. The blanket part refers to the Gee's-Bend quilts. The beach and the bench refer to these patches. And they are from a digital collage I made, and I took pictures of these modernist benches that are in Washington Park in Albany. When I took them, it was the side of the park with the tennis courts that the skateboarders had kind of co-opted, which I thought was really interesting. And then there were these beautiful modernist benches that sort of have a kind of relic feel to them. Since the city has allowed most of the tennis courts to become this skate park, which is also a really cool thing that happened. But these benches sit out on the park, and they're made in such a way that two people sit facing in one direction, and then on the ends of the benches, two people sit facing the other direction. But the way that they're structured, it would almost promote strangers or, people who don't know each other in the park kind of communicating with their next door neighbor because they're sort of facing each other. So this lovely sort of utopic communal idea made manifest in these concrete modernist benches, and modernism being something of a utopian instinct in art and design. So I took these benches and I put them on the background of a rather banal beach scene that I downloaded from the internet. Fair use, I checked, but and so these pictures of benches that I kind of cut out and had taken, and they float over this beach scene. And in this case, I took those collages and cut them up into the triangles and reformatted them. So they're hard to recognize as the benches. And they're kind of like a patchwork quilt of sort of fixing gaps within the piece. Another thing that brings me to that influenced me in this piece was the idea of the internet. Years ago, I read a book called Tubes by Andrew Bloom. It was written in 2012, and Andrew Bloom is a writer, and he was having difficulty with his internet one day, and it was a recurring issue. And he called the providers. They came down and they said that squirrels were eating the wires, and thus his internet service was spotty. And he was like, squirrels? Isn't it this big cloud up there? I'm like, well, why? How can something so small disrupt this like massive cloud-like thing? And space, So he decided to go on a journey to find that actual internet, the physical manifestation of the internet, and found that it was in a lot of warehouses, temperature controlled, but with wires inside a lot of tubes. Like that was a recurring theme, and thus the title of the book. So I was thinking of that also in terms of the kind of imagery of these sort of connecting stripes or tubes. And also of the idea of the internet being this kind of communal space that was begun with great verve for how wonderful it would be, how much information we would be able to access, how quickly, how we would be able to access people from all over the planet so readily, and how in reality it is that, but it's also this kind of banal, sometimes evil entity, and actually it's benign, it's us, right? But so those are the things, and I'm sure someone coming into the exhibit is not gonna think like, oh, tubes. But those are the things that are at work in my mind in making the piece. I'm also clearly playing with like light and transparency and opaqueness and maybe some of those things as concepts also feed into my thinking. And that's all.